I'm Michelle Cooper, and welcome to my front porch. This is just a step out of the door of my studio today, and the autumn colors are starting to really show up. The weather has gotten colder at night, and now instead of just the yellow and auburn colors, we've got some reds and some red oranges. That's our serviceberry tree over there. So I'd like to show you a couple of other references. You could have photo references. Here in the Pacific Northwest, this is the usual color scheme we have in the fall, unless people have planted trees, and then you might see something that's more brilliant, like orangey trees, maple trees, those kind of things. But whatever your reference is, just go take a walk out in the woods before all of the leaves fall and be inspired to do a little bit of a sketch. So here's a little ink sketch that I've done. It's pretty abbreviated because I'm planning on working between ink and wash, watercolor and wash. I put a few dark indications here for darker values just to remind me. And then most of the rest of the work is going to be done with watercolor. So here are a few of my yellows that I could choose. Here are some of the reds that I could use, and you can see I use different brands. And here are some swatch tests that I make before I start a painting to see transparency and everything else. A couple of different brushes that I might use. For the broader strokes, the bigger areas might be this one. It's a 1/2 inch rosemary dagger brush. I can draw with it and I can make broad spaces, but this is a pretty small paper here, so just have to kind of decide how much paint I really need for this postcard sized piece of paper. So I'm going to start here in my focal point. I've already done a value plan, which I'll show you in just a second, but I'm going to do the shadow sides of my subject's red jacket here, just to sort of key an area of color and how dark it is, and then I can use my water brush here to soften the edges. I think if I try to do it with the bigger brush, it might just smear too far, and I'm trying to keep everything else pretty dry until I need it to change moisture in the paper. Okay, and then right here, just put a little indication of the face. I'll develop this a lot of this later. Now I have to decide how I'm going to handle all the rest of this area around here. Let's take a look at the value plan and see what we have. All right, there, now we've got the values for the foreground, the middle ground, the background, the verticals. All those things will be filled in with color this time instead of just the ink wash as you saw in the original value plan. So in watercolor, you usually start with your lightest colors. So my lightest color here will be yellow, and I have choice of 3 different yellows here. I think I'm going to go with this cool yellow. It's Aureolin, or if you have cadmium yellow light, you can use that. Cadmium yellow is somewhat opaque though, and this is a very small space to put paint in, so I'm leaving some gaps where this Aureolin here that I have, I'm going to use water to thin some of it out. That's kind of pure color right out of the tube that I've already put in here, and I don't need it to be absolutely straight out of the tube. Here's a different yellow. This is raw sienna, so I want the brightest colors to be kind of across the middle left quadrant of the painting, so everything else is going to be less brilliant, less interesting, and keep this area as my focal point in the lower left, in the left-hand quadrant. Now, for the background, I could use a complementary color. I could use cobalt violet, or I could use dioxazine violet back there. But if I want to stay with an analogous color scheme, I should start with the yellow that I began with and mix colors on the page so that they are compatible. So if I have yellow and cobalt blue, if I start with cobalt blue, then mixing yellow with that will give me kind of a middle distance kind of green, not too bright. Yellow and blue making green. Cobalt is a good mixer, by the way, with other colors. See how it changes when I put it on top of the yellow though. So I think that's a pretty light value back there, not the same as I had originally planned. So I can add a little more pigment in here to push the values a little bit darker. Not too dark though, I don't want that to be too dark. I have another idea for other darks going on. So here's some red. So put the same red in here. I just want there kind of be like a sort of a gradation, a variation of autumn colors in the very distant hillside there, using the negative space in between the trees. Those trees are going to have some lights and darks on them, so maybe just a little bit darker, a little bit more cobalt blue in here, and let this all mix wet into wet. Okay. Now, down here should be darker. I want to kind of accent the difference between the bright colors in the foreground and lighter tones in the foreground, and then the darker values in the middle distance. Okay, don't want to forget to echo a little bit of that red from the figure. Put that into the tree, the fallen leaves. And then let's see what's next. Sometimes you might want to put in the sky in the background, but I'm going to check how wet this is and see if I can maybe put a little bit darker tone in the figure so I can judge everything else. I don't even know if I'm going to even need to put any sky in there. This is just a little line and wash sketch anyway, so I'm going to have to keep on trying to stay as random as I can with some of these leaf shapes. Now, here, put some of this red here, echo it on here. Okay, so the light midtones are taken care of in the background and the foreground so far, but the verticals, these are the ones that I want to have more accent, more contrast. And I could be doing that with regular watercolor and just paint it with my brush, but I have a new pen. It's a Copic drawing pen, and the ink is kind of brownish looking. And so I thought it would be fun to use my water brush, Aqua Pentel Aqua brush, and the pen, and see if I could play around with a little bit of ink wash in this ink and watercolor drawing here. So if you deposit some of the wet ink from your fountain pen, and the thing about this is on watercolor paper now, so watercolor paper is a little bit more absorbent than actual kind of paper that you would use, multimedia paper for ink. So if you go in soon as possible here, maybe I didn't go in soon enough, so now I could just take off some ink here. Nope, get some from the back of this pen here, and so if I can get it dark enough. This pen doesn't work the same, I see, as my Lamy pen does, so I'm going to just have to alternate some water and some ink until I get the effect I want. See, I can go from drawing a line to painting in some washes. Here we go. Here we've got some ink spreading now. It's nice, strong, dark, so if that's something that you're working on in your watercolor, you can't get things dark enough, maybe the ink would be the way to go. And then you can smudge it so that it looks sort of gradated, the way that a watercolor wash would do. And some of that water is in this section over here, so now when I touch it with the pen, it'll create these nice soft kind of velvety darks. And this is where I've indicated some dark into the background, so I want to push that value a little bit more here. I can use the pen to do this, or I can use watercolor to do it, either way. Okay, now I want to create some simultaneous contrast here. Simultaneous contrast is where you use complementary colors, like the red and the green next to each other. And each one seems brighter because they are adjacent to each other. If you mix them into each other, then they become neutralized or grayer looking. So depending on where I put this green here, this kind of murky green, I can create a duller color or a brighter contrast, bringing attention to certain areas in the painting. Speaking of contrast, I think I could put a few little darks here on the other little buddy, and maybe some calligraphic marks to indicate the undergrowth and the leaves. Okay, so now I guess I could put some more hatching and darks there at the top of the tree trunks. Maybe a few random branches and twigs in between them to create the interest up in that area where the sky is kind of blank. And I can also spot in some of that yellow again to stand for the few leaves that are left hanging in the trees, and do that while I still have some white space here. Now while that's still wet, I'll touch in a little bit of the red so it'll create some variety of midtones and create some yellow oranges in the foliage of the trees. And then I can kind of spot that through the rest of the painting as if some of these leaves have fallen. Create the effect that there was some wind here. Kind of activate this area to pull your eye back over to where the figure is. Still needs to be darker, I think, right along the edges. See what happens. It seems not to be drying very dark here. All right. Or dots. A lot of times I'll do some spatter for this, but again, like I said, this is a pretty small postcard size, so I'll try to be as random as I can. Large, medium, and small, light, medium, and dark variations of the colors to show the different distances. Okay, back to my pen. I want to balance the textural effect of those last brush strokes with some line work, hatching, brush work. Get some variation in soft and hard edges and rough textures and lights and darks. That's fun to do with your pen. Okay, so now I just want to build up this contrast here and some character strokes, knot holes, shadows, darks at the top here. Some of them soft dark, some of them made with just the pen hatching, and some of them made just with a smudge of the ink. And work my way around all these tree trunks until I feel like I have a nice feeling of light ricocheting around in the forest here. Light against dark, dark against light. Try a little counter change. There's a lot of reflected light in the forest, so you can get away with all kinds of variations in the light direction because of the light bouncing around. Okay, get that all finished up. Now with pen and wash, the ink, depending on the kind of ink you have, you can do layers, but the layering in transparent watercolor versus the layering in ink is a little bit different. The line work that you show in ink work can kind of read all the way through from one layer to the next, whether you have like a soft ink wash on there, or you have some etching kind of, cross-hatching strokes. You can integrate them back and forth. Depends on what effect you want to have here. The thing about the ink wash itself, though, is it kind of blends together, so you don't get the same layering effect as you would with actual watercolor. But I do like the contrast of the texture and the wash that you can get with the ink and the ink wash and the ink line. Oh, this is the fun part here now. Get these little tiny twigs in between the branches and the boughs sticking up at the top. There's not a lot at the top of the tree here, but I think this linear sort of intertwining is important so that you don't have this looking just like fence posts, but looks like the trees grew here together in the forest. It's fun. Okay, now over here I think I'll put a skein of Canadian geese here. They are flying over this time of year for their migration, so that's one of my indications of life that I have in my painting. And just a little smudge here and there to show movement, so it's not just all line. Okay, now there, that area is all the same between the middle ground and the distance, so I've got to get this darker. I did have a plan for this though. Darker shadow shapes. This is just some of the purple that I was using as one of my complementary colors, and I can add some red into it because that belongs to purple, and I'll sprinkle some darks. Reds can be darks. Get some contrast going here. It looks like it's getting pretty well balanced. Okay, so over here I think I need another cool color here, so just test this out lightly to start with. The cobalt blue right on top of the existing colors there. Could be darker. Let's see. Yeah, I like the cool element in this lower part of the foreground, middle ground area here. Soften the edges so that it doesn't look cut out, pasted on. Okay, now it's time to create a little more contrast here between the subject, the focal point, and the area nearby. So I'm going to put some darker negative spaces in here and put that into the middle distance. Just some neutral colors, basically the purple that I've already used can be used for that, and it creates kind of a neutral look when it's on top of the other colors. Let's see, what else? A little darker shadow base of this blackberry bush. That needs to have more contrast in it. Okay, what else? Some shadows back here maybe. Directional lines possibly. Nodal points in between the trees to push them forward a little bit. And some more land planes along here. Cast shadows. Okay, so I'll get this dog set into the land here. Now, looking closer at my focal point, I want to take this from an ink scratchy drawing of a dog in, and as far as the contrast on the person too, I want to make them more of the painting part of the painting, if you will. So I'm going to add some really dark, this is still cobalt blue on top of the original, just a little softer wash that I had in there. So add that and then add water at the top just so it'll blend in. I don't want it to look pasted on. All right, that's better. Now, let's see. I could take a watercolor pencil too, and I could make a more opaque kind of passage here out of her jacket, wind blowing it around her sides, and I could create a little bit of contrast between transparent and somewhat opaque by just using a watercolor pencil. Maybe make a shadow in the face here. And then, let's see, the dog. That can't be a see-through dog here, so we'll start out with a warm undercolor rather than just putting black on there. I want to put some burnt sienna, and then I'll add some purple on top of that. Oops, that's not enough paint. There's too much water there. There we go. And that solidifies him and makes him in context with the figure as well. Good. It's probably fine the way it is, but maybe just one more little shadow shape here, variation in the warm colors. That would be if you're looking in really, really close though. And as I said, this is just a postcard size sketch, so certainly don't need all of this finessing at the end. It was fine just before I did any of this stuff, but you know, it's fun. Okay, just want to put a few cast shadows so that all these things are kind of connected to the rest of the painting here, to the ground. And that'll do it, I think. So take a walk in the woods in the fall air and with the beautiful colors changing in the leaves, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.